Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Carlton People. It actually is not another episode of Carlton People. Firstly, I'm going to introduce Tony Saros. Hello, mate.
G'day. Hello. How's everybody?
We are good. You don't know this. You're about to find out. I've just realized this is episode 100 of Carlton People.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a nice little milestone.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
I realized minutes ago, as I had my list here, that this was 100. So, mate, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I've been wanting to do 100 episodes for a long time. So it's cool because I think we've met a bit into the journey of the channel.
Yeah.
Know each other very well now, but I'm looking forward to getting the real story, getting the whole story, because I kind of know what's happening now with you, but I really want to dive into your childhood
Past.
and the past.
Yeah. Okay. No, mate, I'm happy to. In fact, I'm honoured to be on the show, to be honest, because I've been a bit of a fan from day one. Although I probably didn't interact so much initially, I really enjoyed tuning in. You know what? It's nice not only talking to like-minded people about the Carlton Football Club, but it's also, there's Carlton gone through such a bad period over the last decade or more. There's so much negativity, and you almost want a relief from normal social media interaction because there's so much negativity. Oh, he's Spud, he's this, he's that. As a supporter, and I'll touch on this a bit later, but as a supporter, I want to support the team. I don't want to be the negative guy. Yeah, I get it. Some players aren't, cut out for it and whatever else. But you know what? They're pulling on the navy blue. Just get behind them as much as you can rather than, try to find a reason why he should be sacked and let's put somebody else in or drop him or, delist, etc. So coming and talking or listening to you, it brought a bit more balance. It wasn't all negative all the time. Yeah, we were doing it tough, but at the same time, it felt like someone who was understanding how a true supporter is feeling rather than just a supporter that wants to bag it because it's popular to jump on the bandwagon of, Carlton are terrible, so I'm going to agree with that. You know what I mean? I didn't ever want to be that person. And listening to yourself felt like it was more balanced. It wasn't all roses, but it was more balanced rather than just so much negativity out there. That's sort of how I've lived the last probably 15, 20 years of football, other than a couple of good years when Rats was coach. Other than that, we obviously had done it pretty tough, but yeah, I think we've turned the corner. So
yeah, well, we will unpack that for sure. We've got lots to get through. I actually never asked you, how did you become a Carlton supporter? What is the original story?
Well, in case for people who mightn't know, I live in New South Wales and, in fact, live in Wollongong, but you could call it Sydney, and spent a fair bit of time in Sydney before we moved here. But originally growing up as a kid, I lived in the Riverina. So I lived in a little country, or was born in a little country town called Finley. So Shane Crawford, Tom Hawkins town. So some good AFL players have come out of there. David Murphy, who you mightn't remember, played for the Swans. Anyway, those guys, that town was definitely an AFL or VFL town at the time. So I grew up loving the sport. All my friends at school played it. I played it. And it was, who do you go for? Well, I don't remember what made me go for Carlton, but I do remember Carlton was the it team. So we're talking 1970. I know that's a long, long time ago, but that's probably as far back as I can remember. So around the 1970 period, Carlton had just come off a cracking grand final win. The kids at school were all talking about it. They were the team. Everyone was talking about Jezelenko this and Jezelenko that. And somehow I got caught up in all of that to the point where I became more passionate than anyone at school. Like I needed every footy card. I needed everything, every newspaper clipping I would keep. So that's probably where it kicked off back then in the schoolyard more than anything else. Considering a lot of the kids there were Geelong supporters because the local town, Finley, wore Geelong colours. But yeah, it was the team to be on was Carlton at the time, and I jumped on board and has seriously never gotten off. So
No.
yeah,
Okay. So, I mean, my theory is there's the moment you become a supporter, and then there's the memory when you first go to a game or when you first feel the energy and the electricity of the crowd. So, does that ring a bell for you? Do you have an early memory of your first game?
look, unfortunately, it's not that I don't have a memory; it's that I just never got to games. So living in a little country town, it was difficult for us to get to Melbourne, certainly on a weekend. My dad owned a fruit market in town in Finley, so he would go into Melbourne once a week, but it was always on a Monday. So it was a Monday that he would head into the Melbourne Vic markets, whatever they were. And, for school holidays, I would tag along with him. I remember going often. But football was played on a Saturday and Saturday only, except I do remember vividly there was I don't know if it was the Queen's birthday long weekend. It was definitely a long weekend. And Carlton were playing on a Monday, which was a rare event in itself.
Yeah.
And I can remember they were playing against Footscray, or the current Western Bulldogs, but I remember it so well. And it looked like the stars were going to align. I was going to go to my first ever game. Dad was happy to take me. He said, we'll drive, on Royal Parade. We'll be right out the front. We can go in if we can. If we can park the truck somewhere, let's do it. So off we went. It's a 3-4 hour drive from Finley to Melbourne. We got up early in the morning. Off we went. Well, unfortunately, the truck broke down. We didn't make it in time to get to the game. I was in tears. I can remember still driving along Royal Parade that day, and the game was literally over, and people were pouring out of the ground. And look, I can't remember if Carlton won that game or not, but that's the closest I came to physically going to a match as a child.
Wow.
The way things worked out, we actually moved to Sydney as a family. I was 14 years old. It was 1977. We moved to Sydney to live, and it almost looked like AFL was behind me, or VFL was behind me, because even at that point, the Sydney Swans hadn't been relocated to Sydney, or South Melbourne hadn't been relocated. So there was literally no AFL coverage up here. There was one live game every Saturday. So the match of the round was played live, the full entire game. So it was just a flip of the coin what team happened to be on. But because Carlton weren't a bad team, they were reasonably often on a Saturday's match.
Yep.
So I did get to watch them a bit then. The local papers had a little tiny strip of AFL results in it at the back. It was just so hard to keep engaging in AFL at that point, or VFL, sorry. Anyhow, as fortune would have it, Sydney relocated, or South Melbourne relocated to Sydney. So AFL started to get some sort of flavouring or following, which gave me opportunities to possibly go to games. And I think it was the year before Sydney were relocated, Carlton played Essendon in an exhibition game in Sydney. And I do believe it was for points, if I can remember correctly. I'm pretty sure. And it must have been 1980, because I know we'd won the flag the year before, and just that sort of time frame lines up for when Sydney did relocate up here. And that was literally my first game that I'd physically gone to live. And it was, I was beside myself that I was there, and I was already, 17 years old. So it took a long time for me to get to a physical game because of that. But I haven't looked back since, and I probably haven't missed a Carlton game that's either played in Sydney. And just to backtrack a little bit, we did move from Sydney to Melbourne with my own family as I got married and 3 children. We moved to Melbourne and lived there for 10 years, and I was making up for lost time. And, we literally went to every single Carlton game in that 10-year period that we lived down there.
The thing that I find most fascinating about, the 70s and when you were talking about how they would show one game a week, and if you were Carlton, you're probably lucky because we were pretty good, so we probably had a few times that we were in that slot. The thing that I find so fascinating is, how did you stay engaged if you didn't have the ability to watch or read it the way you do now? Like, now I can get it because there's content everywhere. There's something to read or watch. So how did you really keep the passion?
Look, as a child living in Finley, it was still not no issue. I'd love to have gone to a game, but it was not a problem to keep up with content because we still got the Melbourne papers.
Right.
There was the winners that were on, I think, on a Saturday night, or it might have been a Sunday night back then. I'd watch every possible footy show that was on at the time. They'd normally show the last quarter of some matches as replays. There was never full games entirely. This was before I'd moved to Sydney. Once I'd moved to Sydney, it was difficult, like to the point where I was struggling to keep up. I mean, I'd keep an eye on everything that I could, but there was no social media. There was no internet for that matter. It was simply a matter of listening to it on either a radio, which I remember doing a lot as a kid as well, if the game, trying to listen to the games live, or simply watch that game that was live on a Saturday, whatever game that might have been, and then getting, around the ground results and stuff like that coming through.
Wow.
So there was some lean years of watching it before the Sydney Swans located to Sydney. So just to get the time frame right, we moved to Sydney in 1977. Yep, 1977. So I was 14, and the Swans appeared up here, I think, in 81. Someone can correct me; it might be 82, but yeah. And in that little gap, that 4 or 5 years, I struggled, but I still hung in there. Like, we won a premiership and a couple of them in that period. So I was still enough engaged, trying to convert every person I went to school with here in Sydney to be an AFL supporter or a VFL supporter. They all had the old GayFL and this and that, all the stuff trying to play down AFL versus rugby league. Funnily enough, I started playing rugby league because there wasn't any AFL teams here, or certainly not at school, so I didn't have a school competition. And it was funny because I then became the kicker in the team because I could kick a ball better than anybody else in the rugby league team because of my playing AFL. So it wasn't until I got my driver's license that I could go back and play some football up here, because there was some Australian rules football teams in Sydney metropolitan area, but they were all like a half an hour or 40-minute drive to get to training and stuff. So I had to have my driver's license before I could physically do that. But I got re-engaged pretty quickly, and then met other people that were obviously in those that supported AFL. It wasn't hard for us to get back on board. And then I think what's really the big switch back to AFL fully in my life was when pay TV came along. And I'd say that was like in the mid-90s from memory. And that was when, I could really re-engage and watch every single game and
everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get caught back up in it all.
So that's also the time when we became the AFL, right? Or we go from VFL to AFL, we introduced the new teams. What was that like? What was that like, the transition in terms of the way the game was covered and the way it was played? Because I know that when I look at the footage of the 80s and the 70s, like it's, and maybe even still to an extent in the 90s, but not as much, that the blood, it was almost like entertainment, like fighting. There was a real element of behind the play fighting that would happen.
Yeah, look, my memories of it becoming national was a little bit. I'm always been a traditionalist in nearly everything I do. I love the tradition of things. So it was a little bit hard to embrace, but then selfishly or otherwise, I embraced it because I wanted it to be in Sydney. So I was behind it for those reasons. And looking back, I'm glad it's a national competition. And certainly, the game, a lot of people you talk to say, the game's not like it used to be. It's this, it's that. I love it as much now as I ever have. Strangely, I loved it back then, but I still do. And yes, it's a totally different game. If I sometimes just put on a game and watch from early 2000s, and it's totally different to today's game. But I enjoyed every minute of that time, and I'm enjoying every minute of this time. I'm not one to sit there and say, this is no head-eye contact, no this, no that. If this is the way it's evolved, so be it. Does it look the same as it did in the 70s? Look, probably not, but probably more from a positional point of view. You've got your forwards running backwards and forwards. They never did that. Your Plugger Locketts and your Alex Jesselinka, they played full forward, they stayed at full forward. That was just how the game was played. Everyone played up their position on the ground rather than, the defensive modes that we have today. but then I love the way it's done today as well. So, I'm pretty flexible like that. And, like it or not, football is the way it is today. And look, we only have to see how much support it's got physically by people attending games. When you consider how much coverage there is, TV wise, internet wise, everything, and yet the crowds still pack it out. So it's got to say something for it.
Yeah, right. Of you've seen some really good Carlton teams. You've seen, multiple premierships. What's the standout team that you've watched win a premiership?
Look, it's easier to fall back to 95 because they were such a good team. They destroyed literally everyone except a couple of bottom teams they lost to through the season, strangely. But and it's hard not to look at them and think, wow, how good were they? But I bring myself back a bit further to my childhood and the Jeff Southby days, the David Mackay's, the Alex Jezelenko, the John Nichols. And John Nichols retired a little bit after I first, started loving the game as a child, but his name was etched, to the point he was a superhero. It's a bit hard to explain, but I think those years of 72 and 79, as far as premierships goes, probably 79 the most sticks in my mind. I remember the day like it was yesterday with Jezza holding up the cup like he was my idol, being the captain and the coach, beating the old arch enemy, and seeing him hold that premiership cup up there with Percy Jones. That was a very special grand final win for me in my lifetime. But we've had some great wins, some great players in every one of those teams. I could pick names that just make you drool. But we have them today too. Don't worry. We've got Patrick Cripps and Curnow and Walsh and Wiedering, and the list goes on. I don't like singling out people. There's a lot of champions in our current team too.
Yeah. Well, if we fast forward to today, what are the characteristics that you see in this team that we watch? We're filming this end of 2023. What are the characteristics, if any, that you see in this team that mirror some of the great teams, or maybe early stages of some of the great teams that we've had?
Yeah, look, I think our team is surprisingly stable. There's a lot of players there that are bought in. They're on pretty good contracts. I mean, there's always going to be a couple that they can't keep, like Paddy Dow and stuff that I still wish would be there. But, you can't begrudge him wanting to be playing first grade all the time. But I feel like the current team has that real buy-in. And I think if there was something that the Carlton teams that have been successful that have had, is that buy-in. Okay, it's a different era. Back in the McClure days, they'd all go out for a beer and, have a drinking session, and that was their bonding and whatever else. But I could tell you when it came to the footy day, they'd be all playing for each other. And I'm seeing that in this crop of Carlton players. There seems to be a buy-in where they all want the same result. You'd think that's easy to say, and every sports team should feel that way. But I think we've been a bit disjointed, and not only us, many other teams, but a bit disjointed when it came to that, where it really feels like that's the corner that's turned. Yes, we've got good players and whatnot, but they're all bought in. And that can only lead to success. Look, I'm an internal optimist too. You have to be, otherwise, I would have probably picked a different sport by now. But it just feels that way. Yeah, if that was the one thing that I can see is a buy-in by the players. It seems like they all want, they seem good mates. They seem like there's no infighting. There seems to be, they're all on the one page of we're going to drive this club to success. And to me, the best thing about it is that we are keeping a good 98% of the nucleus together, and I think that's where this team's going to grow, is the fact that they're all stuck together and going forward.
Yeah. What's it like having your own family now, children that you go to the footy with, you experience that with? Like, what's it like, fostering the next generation of the supporter?
Yeah, look, I love it, and I felt like I missed out a fair bit in my younger days. Pre-17-year-old, I couldn't get to the game due to where we lived, etc. It certainly wasn't deliberate, but it just was the way it was. It was just a footy game, and it was only on a Saturday. It's not like you could plan around anything else. So to be able to take my children all the time, I love it. Like, I engage with them so much, particularly my youngest, Victoria. As you know, she's a fanatic as I am.
She
But my
is.
wife loves it. She's just as into it as I am and doesn't want to miss a game. My eldest daughter, look, she's grown a little out of it, but seems to be coming back into it, partly due to our success or better results of the last year or two. My middle one's always been Vanessa. She's been a little bit left field. She's would come to the games. Like, we'd all go, we'd have a family membership, and we go to every Carlton match when we lived in Melbourne for that 10-year stretch. And Vanessa was probably the least excitable about it. She did like it. Like, she had her favourite players at Dennis Armfield and whatever else, but she probably never engaged to the point where she'll sit back and watch the highlights again when we get home and that type of thing. Where Tina would, she'd have a scrapbook with all the, Tina's my eldest one, she'd have scrapbooks with all the players' signatures. We go to the Carlton family days. But Victoria has probably embraced it the most, where she's probably, obviously because she's a little more active on social media as well, but look, call it what you like. I brainwashed them into being Carlton supporters from day dot. There was never going to be anything else. And
It's a job well
they're
done.
all on board. They're all pretty on board. And I love going to the game with the girls. I love it. I feel, maybe that's something I missed out on a little bit with my dad, when I was younger, but that wasn't deliberate. It was just the way it was. So I'm making up for lost time. There's any opportunity to go to a Carlton game. We fly down to Melbourne 2 or 3 times a year at least, drive down once or twice, obviously go to any of the Sydney or GWS games. We drove up to Brisbane for the prelim. Yeah, we're pretty much Carlton nufties. I mean, people up here in Sydney, which don't really embrace sport the way we do, I think, like even the rugby league supporters, probably find me a bit of a nufty for the fact that I love the game and talk about it so much.
Yeah.
But I've got no regrets. I'm pretty happy with how it's all panning out. The girls are happy. I did say to Victoria early this year, after we'd come down for the Carlton Essendon game, and that was when we had our 7th or 8th loss in a row, whatever it was, that bad patch. And I said to her after the game, or driving back to Sydney, I said, I apologise for making you be a Carlton supporter.
Oh, no.
I said that to her because I just could not see light. If we were going to win a game after that bad stretch, I thought it had to be the Essendon game. But it wasn't, but it was the week after. So it did look. You've probably seen it in Victoria a fair bit, and if you obviously listen to any of her bestie podcasts, she's the internal optimist, very much like myself.
Yes.
At the worst, there's still a chance. There's still a chance. There's still a chance. No matter what situation we're in, we're still a chance. And she was still holding on to that come the Essendon game, and I was proud that she felt that way. And then after winning against the Gold Coast, well, okay, we are still a chance, and we're all back on board again. It didn't take long to change
not
the
at
tune
all.
once again.
Let me tell you, I've worked with Tori for a little over a year now, and I would consider myself an optimist. And I think I probably had a few patches where I started really doubting, like, oh, what have I done? Like, I just, like you said, couldn't see light at the end of the tunnel. I think after the games against Collingwood this year, Melbourne this year, and then the Bombers game this year, it was such a deep hole that I just could not see anything other than another disappointing end to a season. I started looking ahead too far instead of just trying to stay in the moment, because the moment was just awful in itself. But yeah, people like Tori definitely help conversations flow because of that optimism, and I can absolutely see where you say she gets that from you.
Look, there was such a long period of bad football, if you like, or bad footy team from probably 2002 We moved to Melbourne in 2005, stayed there for literally 10 years. And yeah, we won a couple of final games against Richmond and the Bombers, which were fantastic. Brett Ratton and then Mick Malthouse. And I thought that was the corner, the changing, the turning of the corner at that point. But unfortunately, it wasn't. And look, if my children could endure those years, like Tors has never seen a premiership. None of my girls have. Well, Victina would have, but she would have been 1 year old. So, no, she hasn't either. If they've been able to endure that and still be passionate, I'm not just, I gave the Carlton, like they're passionate Carlton people. That says something, for them being well and truly brainwashed, I suppose. That's the best way of calling it. Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, they know it means a lot to me. Like it's just part of who I am. Definitely part of, like, I'm a Carlton person through and through. There's no other way of looking at that.
Yeah, no doubt. What is it about the club that you think gets us so passionate? Because I've been doing this for a long time, and throughout that journey, I've often had self-reflection, and I'm like, it's a fantasy. It's a made-up game, made-up rules, and we live in this world, and we have so much more access to it now. But there's just something about it. For me, my happy place is at a game at the footy, at the MCG, at a game. That's my happy place where I'm at my most peaceful. So what is it about the club that you think gets people so into it?
Look, it's hard to say because it's a history of stuff, a history of following them and seeing the highs and lows, I suppose. And banter plays a little bit of a role. Having either relatives or friends that follow, or even work colleagues that follow. Essendon in particular. Like, I know the Carlton-Collingwood rivalry is deep, but to me, Essendon's my most hated team, and that's more due to work colleagues than anything I can think of. Just the ribbing that happens backwards and forwards. But Collingwood certainly aren't very far behind, I can assure you. But I think, you know what? It's hard to explain, but if I had to, it's going to sound silly to a lot of people, but to me, I look at the Carlton football jumper and the monogram that's on the jersey, and I say, it's almost like they're Superman. Now, Superman had a big S on the front. Well, Carlton's got this. Yep. No other team. Well, I know Fitzroy Football Club had a similar thing at the time, but no one was really like Carlton, as successful. And something about the jerseys. It really is unique in itself. I mean, you could hold that jersey up probably to certainly anyone in Australia, but probably any other sports followers, and they'd still know that was an AFL jumper based on the fact that, but you could hold up a Collingwood jumper and that could be various soccer teams or anybody else. But something about the Carlton jumper means that's AFL or VFL or our sport. There's something very special about it. And I just in love with the team. Just love it.
Yeah. How do you reconcile the way that we consume it now? We go from, Saturday 2 till 5, every team's playing, game of the round, live, newspaper clippings, you're interstate. Now you can watch any game on replay, on demand. Last few years, we've now added the content community aspect. Like, how do you reconcile all of this that's happened?
Well, it can go two ways, and if you love the sport, then it's a good thing because I can never get enough. Like, I'm on the AFL.com app, on my phone while I'm in the middle of watching a movie, just seeing if any breaking news is happening in the AFL. So I'm the sort of person that can't get enough. I have an SEN app on my phone. Being in Sydney, I'm listening to the Victorian station, every breakfast morning and stuff like that to hear any news. I want to be the first to hear it, So for me personally, the changes, I've more than embraced it because I love watching football. I'll watch 4 or 5 games a weekend. I know that's probably overkill, but I can't get enough of it. Friday night, I can't
I'm
think.
with
I
you.
can't think of anything better than look. I'm not a teenager going out clubbing or otherwise, but I'm sitting at home. I want to watch a footy over watching a movie, or it's going to have a bearing on Carlton, so I need to watch this game. And that's sort of not that I'm making the selections or anything else, but I'm looking at those games thinking how that's going to affect Carlton's game next week, or if we're playing them the week after, or positions on the ladder, all that sort of stuff. So I'm embracing all this extra media attention that the AFL has now, and the available time slots. I hate it when games cross over.
Yeah.
And I know there's a bit of a talk where there's a couple of games that cross over on a Sunday or a Saturday sometimes, and there's nothing worse for me. I want them all to be clear air, and you can watch them all if you had to, type thing. Not that I can probably watch all of them. My wife would definitely kill me by the time if I watched 8-9 games of AFL every week. But and then I'm watching the AFL 360 and the on the couch shows the following week. Particularly after a win, I feel like I really want to hear it reinforced from those guys. I just love the sport, and yours straight after games in particular. But I like watching all your content you did. The talk you did just the other week with Peter. It was a pretty hard act to follow. Now I got to watch that. That was quite moving listening to that. Look, give me footy content. I'm the first and foremost to put my hand up. So I'm probably not representative of the entire AFL community, but I'm the bloke they're targeting, and it's working.
So back to our team. What is the next step? We, obviously made a prelim, got to get there, got to give yourself the best chance. But what's missing for them to take the next step?
Look, to me, winning games of football has always been about kicking goals. Now, I think our defence really stacks up. Our defence is, and we've got a cracking forward line. But has it gelled to the best of its ability? I don't think it has hit its peak just yet. Yeah, we've won the last 3 Coleman medals, and that's sensational, and, hats off to the boys. But when that whole forward line can gel and they're banging on 20 goals a game, that's the sort of thing that will take us places. It's hard to lose a game of football if you've kicked 20 goals. And we have the capability of doing that. Charlie Curnow, what can you say? The guy's a superstar, kicks 80 goals this year, but I'm in the firm belief he can kick 100, because when you stop and think about it, if you kick 4 goals a game, that's only 1 a quarter. You can't tell me Charlie's only good for 1 goal a quarter.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my mentality and bias, but that's how I read the game. Like, is he not good for 4 goals a game? Of course he is. So things like that mean we've got more improvement. I love our back line. I love the way it's ticking along. Our midfields is, it's the midfield of the competition as far as I'm concerned. The ruck's really getting stronger and better. With DeConing's really coming in leaps and bounds. He played a great final series. Our forward line is a good forward line, but it can do more. And, Orazio Fantasia, if he can get fit, he's the sort of guy that could really excite and light things up. But that doesn't mean Owies can't do it, and that doesn't mean, all our small forwards, Motlop, he's only in his 2nd year. We've got so much upside, and it's going to come from our forwards. That's what I see. The back line can stick like they are. The midfield, we're a clearance beast team. If we just got to convert those clearances and inside 50s into goals, we're going to have those 20 goals a game regularly. That's what I can see as us to improve and go forward. And look, the big thing about 2023 is we got to a prelim, which to me is anything can happen in a prelim. We saw that in 99. Getting there is the hard bit. The players have just got to be down to earth. We're starting from the base camp at Mount Everest. We've got to work our way to the peak. We can't expect to start at just below the peak and think we're going to automatically get there, because we're not. So there's a lot of hard work. There's 24, 23, whatever the number is of home and away games to try to win. Look, there's no doubt finishing in the top 4 is going to give you that leg up of making a prelim, because at the end of the day, that's still the catalyst. Every grand finalist that's ever won a premiership had to go through a prelim. So the best chance to get into a prelim, finish in the top 4. You get 2 cracks at it. So at worst, 2 cracks at it. And top 4 is where it's got to be aimed at. And I'm sure that's what was the aim. We weren't far off there this year. If we didn't have that little bad patch, or wasn't that little, that bad patch in the middle, we would have made top 4. So
a bit more consistency, I think.
Yeah.
We've had 2 years now that have been the tale of 2 halves in a season. I think you can just get that all together, win that extra 3-4 games, get yourself to 16, 17, maybe 18 wins. Then, like you said, get that home prelim. Get us at the MCG in a prelim, and you'd literally just give yourself the best chance.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think that's where we're at now, and that's we're not Einstein to work out that that's what the goal is for the team. I'm sure Vossi and everybody else is feeling the same way. But are we capable? Most certainly. Look, the only thing is injuries. And even then, we handled them with aplomb this year. We had some pretty ordinary injuries in the back half when we were winning those games. Is our depth good enough? Look, I think it's pretty good. Losing Dow is going to hurt a little, but we've got Ollie Hollands' brother Elijah come along. He's going to provide some of that depth as well. Having Cunningham for a full fit season, I'm very excited about Cunners for a long time. Look, Fogarty's he's found his spot. There's a lot to like, and it really, the more I talk about it, the more I'm thinking of the forward line. As you can see, if Harry and Charlie both kick good bags, not just one or the other, but both of them start kicking bags, mate, those 20-goal games are well within reach.
Well, the idea of a 20-goal game consistently for us is I just think of what that does for the crowd. 20 opportunities to hear that roar.
Crazy.
I am hopeful. I am definitely a lot more hopeful than I ever have been with this club. So we shall see. Hey, one more before I let you go.
Okay.
Which year will the group next lift up the cup?
I don't doubt they can do it next year. 24 is definitely a possibility, but I am a firm believer that you've got to literally earn them the hard way. And I think it's proof of the pudding in the way we've climbed the ladder so slowly. But I'd be very disappointed if we didn't have at least one more premiership in the next 3 years. And I'd like to think it's 2 of the 3.
Well, that'll be a great celebration.
You bet. Look, I can't see why we can't. We've got the age of the team, the age profile. I think we've barely got a player that's hit 30. It might be Nick Newman and Doc, if I'm not mistaken, about the only 2 now that are in that age bracket. That to me means it's a now thing. It's 2024, 25, 26. If we don't have 2 premierships out of those 3, I'm not going to say it's disappointing, because any premiership would be great, but I'd be surprised if we couldn't do that.
Yeah. Fair. Well, Tony, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for everything, more so your time. Thanks for sharing your story, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you and the family over the last year and a bit. And I look forward to revisiting this conversation when we've won 2 of the next 3 flags.
Yeah, no worries, Terry. Thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me on here. It's been a pleasure.
No worries, mate. Go Blues.
Cheers, mate. Go Blues.